everybody, and thanks for watching. In this video I'm going to be talking about the pronunciation of the letters E and O in Italian. If you've studied Italian diction or watched my other videos on the subject, which for the purpose of this video I'm assuming you have, then you know that practically all Italian pronunciation is governed by a specific set of rules, so once you know the system, you can pronounce most of the words you see. O's and E's are probably the biggest blanket exception to this rule. O's and E's, as you should already know, each have two possible pronunciations, open or closed. For O, these pronunciations are O, closed, and A, open. For E's, these pronunciations are E, closed, and E, open. There are a few hard and fast rules that determine which pronunciation you use in a given case, as well as a number of guidelines that are generally true but have exceptions. In this video, I'm only going to talk about the hard and fast rules, so if these rules don't address the words you're working with, you'll have to look them up in a dictionary that uses IPA. The one I like to use is Dizionario Italiano, which is an Italian dictionary online, but it does have the pronunciations of the words in IPA. I think the Webster Italian-English Dictionary also has IPA pronunciations if an Italian dictionary is too intimidating. The number one thing I want to say right up front is that the conventions about O's and E's are not at all intuitive to English speakers. English is an Anglo-Saxon language, and our pronunciation system is very different from that of Italian. One of the hardest things for English speakers is that English doesn't actually have closed pronunciations of either O or E, since English substitutes diphthongs for these. That's something you'll also remember from my other videos if you've watched them. Italian, on the other hand, favors the closed O's and E's. O's and E's in Italian are closed, I'd say, maybe 70% of the time, so if you have to guess, that's the guess to make. This may be the single biggest mistake English speakers make in Italian, pronouncing O's and E's open when they should be closed. English speakers will tend to say dolcezza instead of dolcezza, for example, because it makes sense to us to make an eh sound before the double Z. So at this point, I'm going to talk about those hard and fast rules. These are rules that, for the purpose of Singer's diction, have virtually no exceptions. Do be aware that pronunciation of O's and E's varies by regional dialect, with northern dialects tending to be more closed and southern dialects being more open, sometimes to an extreme. Obviously, you're not going to be learning to differentiate between dialects at this point in time, but I'm emphasizing this so that you know you can't necessarily trust that a native Italian's pronunciation is going to be correct singing diction. And I'm talking about native Italian singers too here, because in many cases a singer's native language is going to be his or her worst in terms of correct diction. Anyway, that's another story for another day. The first rule is that all E's and O's in unstressed syllables are going to be closed. You may be asking how you'll know which syllables are stressed. Generally, the music will give you that information, since accented syllables will fall on longer note values and more strongly accented beats, such as the first beat in a measure. So if you see in your music that an O or an E is in a syllable that's on one of those downbeats, it may be open. The rest of the time, it's closed. There's only ever one stressed syllable in a word, so if you identify a stressed syllable, you know that any other syllables in the word are unstressed. For example, in the word meraviglioso, the stress is on the second to last syllable. Consequently, the final O and the E in the first syllable are automatically closed. Only the O in the stressed syllable could be open, although in this case that O is closed as well. The second rule is that all stressed final O's are open. You will recognize these because they always have a grave accent over them, like I'm showing on the screen here. An example of this is piangerò. Notice that since the word can only have one stressed syllable, the E in the second to last syllable is automatically closed. This is an example of where English speakers tend to trip up, since we tend to open unaccented vowels, so you'll want to be extra careful that you're pronouncing those unaccented E's and O's closed. The third rule is that all stressed final E's are closed. That means that all final E's are closed, since all unstressed E's are closed anyway. This is a major point where Southern dialects differ from standard Singer's Italian. In a Southern dialect, you'll tend to get pronunciations like perdere, when the standard pronunciation is perdere, with the closed E's on the unaccented syllables. In some cases, you'll even get something like perdere, where the unaccented E's turn into schwas or sounds. So, if you're listening to native speakers to learn, you'll want to make sure they're from probably Milan, Florence, or Rome, where the dialects are more like what you're going to be singing. You could argue that the word meaning is an exception to this rule, but even so, it's the only exception. And don't confuse with a, which means and. So the fourth rule is that certain suffixes will always be pronounced the same, regardless of the word. There are a pretty large number of these, and in some cases recognizing them requires a fairly in-depth knowledge of Italian grammar. So for example, sometimes the rules change for verb endings that sound and are spelled the same but stand for different words. So for example, in the word andrei, the E is pronounced open because this is a conditional tense, meaning I would go. Whereas in the word gridei, the E is pronounced closed because in this case the EI ending indicates a past tense. I'll post more videos about the details of this and will at some point make a list to put on my website that I can link to. A lot of these endings are also common mistakes, so I'll cover those in one of my upcoming common mistakes videos. A couple of really common ones you'll see include zione, as in nazione, which has a closed O in all cases, oso, as in pietoso, which also has both closed O's. And that one has different forms, so a lot of the time you'll also see osa, osi, and ose, and in all these cases that O is closed. Two other suffixes you'll see all the time are etto, which has a closed E, and ello, which has an open E. Both of these also have forms where the final O is replaced with an A, I, or E. Remember that in all these cases, the final O's and E's are closed because they are unstressed, and unstressed vowels are always closed. So that's everything for my rules of O's and E's video. I'll be posting a more in-depth video soon, and I encourage you to subscribe if you found this helpful and would like to see more. Thanks.